Imagine your partner is, just pulling away from you.
Right.
They're growing cold, they're distant, and you walk into the bedroom one afternoon to find they've already packed your bags.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you assume the absolute worst.
Right.
That they're falling out of love, that they're bored, that it's just over.
Which is the natural human reaction.
Exactly. But the truth is something you couldn't possibly guess. The truth is they are receiving visceral, terrifying premonitions of a mass casualty plane crash, and they're desperately trying to protect you from the psychic fallout of hundreds of people dying right inside their head.
It's the ultimate nightmare scenario of an unshared burden, really. I mean, when the walls start coming down in a relationship, our instinct is usually to look for the mundane cracks,
Yeah, like infidelity or money issues.
Right. Financial stress, loss of attraction, things like that. We rarely consider that our partner might be buckling under the weight of something entirely invisible to us.
So true.
Yeah.
Well, welcome to a deep dive that blends the incredible intricacies of human relationships with the extraordinary and, quite frankly, terrifying burden of the supernatural.
It's a heavy one today.
It really is. Today, we have a fascinating narrative case study focusing on two men. We've got Nick Kelly, an American who possesses a very real, very physical ability to see, hear, and act as a conduit for ghosts.
With literal lightning rod for the dead.
Exactly. And on the other side, we have his partner, John McIntyre, who is this incredibly pragmatic, deeply grounded Scottish former fisherman.
We are examining a highly detailed, intimate account of their lives, specifically zeroing in on a critical period of crisis between them. And what makes the source material so compelling isn't just the paranormal aspect, though that is fascinating.
Right.
It's that it serves as a profound look at the mechanics of intimacy, communication, and crisis management. The ghosts are honestly almost secondary to the silence between these two men.
That is the core mission of this deep dive.
Yeah.
We're unpacking how unshared burdens, even supernatural ones, can completely erode the deepest human connections. We're going to explore how people navigate sudden grief, toxic family secrets, and the terrifying responsibility of that psychic ability.
And for everyone listening, we want to establish the stakes right now.
Yeah, think about your own life. Have you ever felt a sudden, inexplicable distance from your partner? Have you ever tried to protect someone, but keeping a massive secret, only to watch that very secret just tear the two of you apart?
It's a universal human failing. We think isolation is a shield, when in reality, it's a wedge.
It really is. So let's get right into the baseline of this relationship. We start on the remote Scottish island of Traighshee.
Oh, beautiful but desolate.
Yeah, and this is John's home turf. He has lived there his whole life, worked the brutal waters of the sea as a fisherman. Nick, conversely, is a former wanderer.
He's had a rough go of it.
To put it mildly, his life before John was incredibly chaotic, constantly moving from place to place, just trying to manage his psychic abilities and outrun the ghosts. But he deliberately settled down on this quiet, freezing island specifically to build a life with John.
It functions as an island sanctuary for them,
Right.
but we have to remember that sanctuaries are, by definition, isolated.
Right.
When we enter the narrative, we're immediately introduced to how these two communicate, and it is overwhelmingly physical.
Yeah, there's a prologue scene in the source material that is just incredibly telling.
It really sets the stage.
John has been out chopping wood-grueling physical labor in the freezing cold, and his shoulder is aching. And Nick spends hours meticulously massaging that pain away, which cascades into this very intense, deliberate physical intimacy.
But I think we need to push on that for a second.
Okay, yeah?
Why is physicality their primary language? I mean, is it just because John's this rugged, stoic fisherman type who doesn't like to talk about his feeling?
That's the easy assumption to make, right?
Exactly, but it's much deeper than that. Think about John's history. He lived a closeted life on this small, conservative island for 30 years.
30 years. Just imagine that.
Right. For 3 decades, his words, his actions, his very identity had to be carefully monitored. He couldn't express his true desires verbally without risking everything.
So physical touch became the only arena where he could be completely honest.
Precisely. He lets Nick take care of his physical body, which, for a man used to hauling nets and weathering storms totally alone, is a massive, profound display of vulnerability.
That makes total sense. They've built this fortress of physical trust. But then, of course, winter sets in.
The Scottish winter is no joke.
No, it's brutal.
Yeah.
The environment outside becomes harsher, darker, and parallel to that changing season, a creeping distance enters the house. Nick begins withdrawing radically.
It's a total behavioral shift. I mean, Nick spends hours late into the night obsessively typing on his laptop in the kitchen.
Just clacking away in the dark.
Yeah, and he surrounds himself with books, claiming he's researching and writing a novel to fend off the island boredom.
But he's barely sleeping.
Barely. And when he does sleep, he's waking up gasping from terrible nightmares. He stops coming to bed with John. He just totally vacates the emotional premises.
And John is entirely sidelined. He's tiptoeing around his own house, feeling like he's actively losing the man he loves.
It's heartbreaking.
It is. He ends up at the local pub, complaining to his lifelong friend Michael, making these really dark, deflecting jokes about taking up the bagpipes just to shatter the silence and get Nick's attention.
The bagpipes joke is funny, but it really masks a deep pain.
Oh, absolutely. Let's look at what this actually does to John internally, because John gave up a monumental amount for this relationship. He gave up the safety of the closet.
Which was his whole life up to that point.
Yeah. The sources note that the local minister literally crosses the street to avoid him now.
Wow.
There's homophobic graffiti about him carved into the pub bathroom. His own mother essentially disowned him.
That is a massive toll.
Right. He faced down all that local prejudice because Nick was supposed to be worth it.
Which is exactly why Nick's sudden emotional absence doesn't just feel like a rough patch. It feels like a devastating betrayal.
It really does.
John sacrificed his standing in his entire world for this intimacy, and now the intimacy is evaporating. From John's perspective, he assumes Nick is simply bored.
Bored with the quiet island life.
Right, bored with the harsh winter, and ultimately bored with him.
But we, as the audience looking at the source material, know that's not true at all. Nick isn't bored.
Not even a little bit.
He's experiencing these horrific, continuous precognitive dreams. He's waking up terrified, and he's using this whole book writing excuse as a cover story. He's actually scouring the internet for news of a disaster.
It's a desperate attempt to maintain executive control when his mind is under siege. Nick assumes that John is better off not knowing about the dark, chaotic horrors happening in his head.
It's like Nick is frantically putting up drywall over a leaky pipe.
Oh, I like that analogy.
Yeah, he's building this structure, his fake writing, his physical distance, his silence, to hide the massive water damage happening in his own mind. But John is standing right there in the living room, watching the walls warp.
Exactly. John can see the water pooling on the floorboard.
Right. The structure is visibly failing, and John is just left standing in the damp, wondering why his partner won't just acknowledge the leak.
That's a brilliant way to look at it, because it really highlights the danger of assumptions in relationships. Both men think they're protecting the relationship.
That is so.
Well, Nick thinks his silence protects John from the horror of the psychic visions. John thinks giving Nick space protects Nick from feeling trapped on the island. But in reality, they are starving each other.
They're starving the relationship.
Exactly. Nick's silence acts as a causal force. It actively pushes John out of the house. It drives him to seek the validation and warmth that he is suddenly starved for outside of their home.
And that sets the stage for a critical, almost catastrophic mistake. Which brings us to the storm on Crete.
The catalyst of the entire narrative.
It really is. John is deeply frustrated, feeling totally emotionally frozen out. He ends up staying out drinking late at the pub, celebrating a local's birthday.
Just trying to feel some kind of warmth.
Yeah, and he crashes on his friend Michael's sofa. The next morning, hungover and super tense, he goes back home, gets into a huge fight with Nick about the damn book, and storms right back out.
He's just at his breaking point.
He goes to the pub for food and runs into a guy named Andy.
And we really need to contextualize Andy here.
Yeah, give us the background on him.
He's a visiting engineer, but crucially, he is someone John knew from years ago, from before Nick, and Andy had previously shown very clear romantic interest in John.
Okay, so there's history there.
There is. Back then, John was closeted and refused him, but now, John is out, he is angry, and he is profoundly lonely.
So John agrees to take Andy out on his boat for a fishing trip. But, this is the Scottish coast in winter.
Yeah.
A sudden, violent storm rolls in.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, and they are completely trapped. They have to pull the boat up onto a tiny, remote, uninhabited island called Crete and seek shelter in this incredibly dilapidated, freezing, miserable little stone hut.
The sensory deprivation of this hut is a vital component of what happens next. It is the absolute antithesis of the warm, safe bed John usually shares with Nick.
It sounds awful.
The narrative describes freezing rain hammering on a tin roof, a damp dirt floor, and the men literally having to hack down sharp, prickly heather with a knife just to have something to sleep on over a mildewed mattress.
Wow.
It is bitter, biting, dangerous cold.
And to survive the night without falling into hypothermia, they literally have to huddle together under John's jacket.
Right.
And in this moment of extreme physical vulnerability, of literal physical freezing that perfectly mirrors the emotional freezing he's feeling at home, John just cracks.
He hits a wall.
Yeah. Andy is right there. He's offering warmth. He's offering desire. He's offering to make John feel wanted in a way Nick hasn't in months. And John kisses Andy. He begins to initiate sex.
We really need to deconstruct the concept of infidelity in this specific context.
Okay, let's get into it.
This near betrayal is not born of malice. It's not born of John falling out of love with Nick or even being genuinely deeply attracted to Andy in a vacuum.
Right, situational.
Very. It is born of a profound, agonizing loneliness. The physical cold of the storm is a direct manifestation of the emotional coldness he feels. He is starved for connection, and his nervous system is just desperately seeking a heat source.
But wait, I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second.
Go for it.
Isn't that just an excuse?
Yeah.
I mean, people get lonely in relationships all the time. They don't all immediately cheat with the first available person in a storm. Isn't John just using Andy as a Band-Aid?
He absolutely is using Andy as a Band-Aid, which is exactly why the encounter fails. And that's the most crucial part of the scene.
Right.
John abruptly stops. Right as it's escalating, his physical body essentially rejects the encounter.
The description in the text is so visceral. He physically recoils. He scrambles backward off the bed onto the dirt floor, and he actually spits out a mouthful of saliva.
It's a total somatic rejection.
Yeah. He realizes with absolute clarity that he simply cannot be with anyone but Nick.
His emotional tether to Nick, despite being frayed to the absolute breaking point, proves unbreakable. He tells Andy, "I can't."
And then what happens?
He spends the rest of that freezing night shivering alone, wrapped in a plastic tarp on the dirt floor, listening to Andy handle his own frustration.
That is bleak.
It is. But John actively chooses the physical agony of the cold over the emotional agony of betraying Nick. It raises such an interesting question about human nature, you know? When we're completely starved for emotional connection, how easily do our brains mistake mere physical proximity for the intimacy we actually crave?
It's an evolutionary trick, right?
Right.
Your body just wants to feel a heartbeat, to feel a hand, and it tries to trick your brain into thinking this will fix the ache.
Exactly.
But John's core truth shines through. He just can't fake it.
That stark realization on the freezing island forces a hard reset for John. He survives the night, drops Andy at a hotel the next morning, and returns home to Nick.
He's done hiding.
Completely.
Yeah.
He realizes he can no longer passively accept the distance. The crisis on Crete forces him to bring the crisis in his own home directly into the light.
So John walks into the kitchen. Nick is there, nursing a coffee, looking like death warmed over. And John immediately confesses.
He lays it all out.
He refuses to lie. He tells Nick exactly what happened, the kiss, the touching, and how he had to stop because of how much he loves Nick.
And we might expect anger here. We might expect a blowout fight.
Throwing plates, screaming, yeah.
But Nick's reaction is entirely unexpected. There is no anger. There is no jealousy. Instead, there is this defeated, hollow resignation.
That is so much worse.
It really is. Nick reveals that he has already packed John's suitcase. He saw John didn't come home from the storm, and he just assumed that John was finally leaving him.
Which, if you think about it, hurts John infinitely more than anger would have. The idea that Nick was just sitting there, waiting to be abandoned, accepting it as an inevitability.
She shatters John.
But this confrontation finally shatters the drywall. To go back to our analogy, Nick breaks his silence. He admits he hasn't been writing a book at all.
Not a single page.
He has been obsessively scouring the internet because he's been having these continuous, horrific, sensory overload, precognitive dreams of a plane crash.
The devastation of this moment is twofold for John. First, he feels this massive wave of relief that Nick's distance wasn't about falling out of love.
Right, he's not bored.
But that is immediately swallowed by absolute horror at the burden Nick has been carrying entirely alone. And then the devastating twist arrives.
Oh man, this part is brutal.
Nick reveals he just received a phone call from Delta Zone Airlines.
The plane crash he foresaw actually happened in Florida. And Nick's estranged father, Brian Hennessy, a man who walked out on Nick when he was a baby, was on board that flight.
All those deaths Nick was dreaming about, it was real.
We really need to pause here and examine the actual mechanics of Nick's psychic ability because it completely dictates his psychology.
We do, because he didn't know his father was on the plane in the dreams.
He had no idea.
The premonition wasn't a clear message. It wasn't, a movie playing in his head with a ticker tape reading Florida plane crash, father aboard.
Right.
It was a chaotic, traumatic, visceral sensory overload. He was smelling jet fuel in his sleep. He was hearing screaming. He was feeling the terror of hundreds of people all at once. And he was desperately, frantically trying to decode this barrage of data before it happened in reality.
But I need to understand this, though. Why keep it a secret?
Well,
Was Nick keeping this from John because he wanted to protect John from the sheer horror of the premonitions? Or was he isolating himself because he felt like a total failure for not being able to decode the dream and stop the crash?
it is heavily the latter. We have to look at the psychology of someone who literally carries the weight of the world.
Yeah, because he saved people before, right?
Exactly. Nick views his psychic ability as a life or death responsibility. In his past, he has used it to find missing people, to save lives. So when he couldn't act on this premonition, when he couldn't stop a commercial airliner from going down, he retreated into profound shame.
He felt responsible.
He viewed himself as toxic, as broken, as a total failure. He shut John out because he felt fundamentally unworthy of John's comforting presence while people were dying in his head.
Wow, so it wasn't just, I'm protecting you, it was, I don't deserve you right now.
Exactly.
That is just heartbreaking. But this revelation radically shifts the narrative of our source material.
Yeah.
We are no longer dealing with a slow-burn domestic relationship drama.
The genre completely flips.
The reality of the plane crash transforms their situation into an active crisis response. They immediately transition from a fractured, hurting couple to a united front. They pack their bags, for real this time, and travel to Florida directly into the blast radius of the tragedy.
And the environmental shift here is incredibly jarring, and the author uses it brilliantly. They fly from the dark, freezing gales of the Scottish winter to the bright, humid, neon green landscape of Florida.
Talk about whiplash.
Seriously, the narrative highlights the stark contrast. The brilliant sunshine, the manicured green grass, the noisy seagulls on the beach, all juxtaposed against the horrific, charred, fuel-scented wreckage of a mass casualty event.
And the external pressures of this new environment immediately act as a stress test for their newly repaired, yet still very fragile bond.
First stop, the morgue.
Right, they go to identify the father's remains. And Nick, a man who deals with the spirits of the dead literally all the time, cannot bring himself to look at the physical, burned reality of his father's body. He just recoils.
Because there is a massive difference between the spiritual residue of a person and the violently destroyed physical vessel.
That makes sense.
And here we see John seamlessly step back into his role as the anchor, the protector. John physically steps between Nick and the body. He shields Nick's eyes. He takes on the visual trauma so Nick doesn't have to.
But the dead body isn't the only problem at the morgue. They are ambushed outside by Alicia Kent.
Oh, Alicia.
Yeah. Alicia is the deceased father's girlfriend, and she is a piece of work. She's described as flashy, aggressive, chain-smoking, wearing totally inappropriate attire for a morgue.
She has an agenda.
She is entirely focused on one thing, money. She reveals that Brian, the father, recently won a $100,000 lottery, and then she drops a total bombshell on Nick.
She reveals that Brian has another son. Nick has a half-brother around 7 or 8 years old living in Atlanta.
Another kid abandoned by this guy, essentially.
Alicia demands that Nick stay away from the lottery money, viewing him purely as a financial rival for the estate.
Now, Nick's reaction to this new family dynamic is fascinating. Discovering this young half-brother radically shifts his perspective.
He doesn't care about the money at all.
Not one bit. Nick doesn't give a damn about the lottery money, but he suddenly cares deeply about this unseen child. He realizes that this kid is facing the exact same abandonment and sudden, jagged grief that he once faced when his father walked out on him.
Exactly. And if we pull back and look at the broader themes here, we see that grief is rarely a clean, solitary emotion.
It's super messy.
It is almost always complicated by logistics, by unexpected family secrets, and by opportunists. Nick isn't just dealing with ghosts. He is dealing with the incredibly messy, greedy fallout of the living.
And the living just keep coming at them.
Wow.
They go out to the actual crash site, which has been cordoned off, and they are approached by Greg Duncan.
Duncan is awful.
Duncan is this sleazy, opportunistic freelance reporter. He recognizes Nick from a past case back in the day where Nick used his abilities to find a missing hiker's body.
He knows what Nick can do.
Yeah. Duncan threatens to expose Nick's psychic abilities to the world, and on top of that, he brazenly tries to flirt with Nick right in front of John. I have to ask, why do you think the source material spends so much time on these secondary living characters, Alicia and Duncan, when there are literal ghosts waiting in the wings?
Because external threats serve a specific psychological purpose for couples in crisis. Think about it. Before this trip, Nick and John were tearing each other apart from the inside.
Right, the internal pressure was killing them.
But the introduction of Alicia's greed and Duncan's invasive opportunism forces them to close ranks. John's reaction to Duncan is incredibly telling.
He gets super protective, right?
He fiercely defends Nick. He acts as a physical and verbal barrier against Duncan. It reminds them both that they are a team against the world.
But while the living present these logistical and emotional hurdles, the true reason they are in Florida is the dead.
The crash site.
The overwhelming psychic noise of the crash site inevitably breaches Nick's defenses, and it leads to a direct, violent, supernatural confrontation back at their hotel room.
We really need to unpack the actual mechanics of Nick's gift here because it fundamentally alters how we view his trauma.
It's not like the movies.
Not at all. When ghosts are near, his reaction is entirely visceral. It is not a peaceful, quiet parlor seance where he just zones out and speaks in a different voice.
No, his nervous system goes into absolute overdrive.
His skin crawls, his aura prickles. He experiences extreme involuntary sensory input.
And the spirit that breaches their hotel room is a prime example of how violent this can be. They encounter a highly aggressive, dark spirit named Grant.
Grant is terrifying.
Now, Grant's backstory is tragic. He was paralyzed in a car crash years prior, lived a life of severe limitation, and is now absolutely furious about dying in this random plane crash.
It's just so unfair to him.
Right. He retains all his living trauma and projects all his rage directly onto Nick.
This is a crucial rule in the lore of this narrative. Ghosts like Grant don't neatly transition into peaceful entities the moment they die. They are bundles of unresolved terror and anger.
They carry it with them.
Grant actually manifests physically in the hotel room. He violently shoves Nick to the floor.
Okay, I need to understand the physics of this universe. How does an incorporeal ghost physically shove a grown man across a room?
Within the logic of the source material, extreme psychic rage can manifest as kinetic energy. Grant's fury at his physical paralysis in life translates into explosive physical force in death.
That is wild.
He screams psychic noise directly into Nick's head, irrationally blaming Nick for the crash. It is not just a haunting, it is an active assault.
And what does John do during this invisible assault? Because Nick is screaming at John to run to get out of the room so he doesn't get hurt.
But John refuses.
He physically grounds Nick. He holds his ground in a room with an invisible, violent force.
Keep in mind, John cannot see or hear the ghosts. He only feels a disconcerting, freezing, creaky-crawly sensation when he is in direct physical contact with Nick during an episode.
Which has to be terrifying.
Absolutely.
No.
Yet John provides the vital physical and emotional gravity that keeps Nick from being completely swept away by the psychic tide.
It sounds like Nick is a human radio receiver, but someone has ripped off the tuning dial and jammed the volume knob to maximum.
Great analogy.
He is catching all these tragic, agonizing frequencies at once, and John is the only thing acting as a grounding wire to keep him from completely short-circuiting.
That is a perfect analogy, and it raises a fascinating dynamic regarding the psychology of caregiving. If we compare John's role to, say, the partners of combat veterans with severe PTSD or spouses of first responders, how do caretakers manage their own profound fear when the person they love is experiencing a horrifying reality they cannot see or fully understand?
That's a huge question.
John has to master his own terror, swallow his instinct to flee in order to be the anchor Nick needs.
And they take that dynamic directly to the crash site at night. Nick goes back to act as a conduit for the victims. It's incredibly draining.
He connects with so many of them.
He connects with a woman, the sister of a survivor named Selena, who desperately needs to apologize for revealing a toxic family secret before she died. He connects with Celia, a mother desperately needing reassurance that her husband and 4 kids will be okay without her. It's just wave after wave of human tragedy.
And John is right there, acting as his secretary.
I love this detail.
He's writing down the names and the messages of the dead on the back of a receipt from Stella's restaurant back home in Scotland. The juxtaposition is brilliant. This mundane receipt from their quiet sanctuary island being used to record the final desperate words of plane crash victims in Florida.
The sheer exhaustion and terror of these psychic encounters completely strip away whatever remaining emotional barriers exist between the two men.
They have nothing left to hide behind.
It forces a raw, unfiltered reconciliation. Because, let's be real, the tension from the silence, the near cheating on the island, the packed bags, none of that has magically vanished just because they're dealing with ghosts.
No, the trauma of the haunting merely suspended their domestic issues. And it finally boils over at a beachside bar later in the trip.
Yeah, John forces the issue.
John tries to make Nick actually talk about their relationship, about the near infidelity on Crete, and about the revelation of the new half-brother. John needs verbal processing. He needs to know where they stand.
But Nick remains evasive.
Always putting up walls.
He retreats into himself, throwing up those familiar defrempes. And John, feeling that exact same freezing distance returning that caused the disaster on Crete, decides he will not go through it again.
He draws a line.
He stands up, leaves his drink on the bar, and walks right out, leaving Nick completely stunned. I have to ask, was John right to do that? Abandoning his partner who just went through a massive psychic trauma?
Absolutely, it was necessary. That argument at the bar is the climax of their emotional arc. Yes. It proved that John would no longer passively accept being shut out. By walking away, John establishes a firm boundary. If Nick wants the relationship, Nick has to actively participate in it with words, not just physical presence or shared trauma. He cannot use his psychic burden as a perpetual excuse for emotional unavailability.
So Nick is left reeling. He has this deeply uncomfortable follow-up interview with reporter Duncan, who, again, tries to hit on him in this incredibly gross display of opportunism, and then Nick rushes back to the hotel room.
Terrified that John is gone.
Yeah, he opens the door, and the room is pitch dark, and there is John, sitting in the dark, clutching a plastic water bottle, absolutely terrified that Nick was going to leave him, or that he had broken the relationship for good by walking out of the bar.
They collapse into each other. And it is here that John breaks down and offers his deepest, most painful vulnerability.
It's such a moving scene.
He admits to Nick that this is his first real, open relationship in his entire life, and he is terrified of failing at it. He doesn't know how to navigate the rough patches, the fights, the negotiations, because he's never been allowed to have them out in the open before.
He's flying blind.
Exactly. He spent his whole life hiding, and now that he's in the light, the glare is blinding him.
And how do they resolve this? With words? No. In moments of extreme existential crisis, words often fail us completely. For John and Nick, they return to their baseline.
The physical connection.
They use profound, deliberate physical intimacy massage, skin-to-skin contact, slow and intentional lovemaking to reaffirm their bond.
We really must explore how physical touch is utilized therapeutically in this narrative. This isn't just a romance trope.
No, it serves a real purpose.
After the violent sensory assault of Grant and the overwhelming sorrow of the victims at the crash site, Nick's nervous system is psychically fried. He is disassociated. He needs the tactile, undeniably real, heavy presence of John to pull him back into his own body.
It's proof of life. The detailed attention they pay to each other's bodies in that hotel room is a deliberate countermeasure to the trauma, the burned wreckage, and the death surrounding them.
It grounds them.
It is a biological way to definitively say, I am here, I am alive, and I am yours. It resets their nervous systems.
This reclamation of their physical and emotional bond is exactly what gives Nick the strength he needs to face the remaining spirits at the crash site the next day. It concludes their emotional journey from isolation back to a unified, impenetrable partnership.
So, as we pull back from the narrative, what does this all mean for us? For you listening, the key takeaway here is that extraordinary abilities, paranormal events, or massive external crises are often completely secondary to the primary challenge of maintaining open, honest communication in a relationship.
Precisely. Nick's ghosts were terrifying, yes. The precognitive dreams of the plane crash were horrific. But his silence was the true threat to his life with John.
It was the silence that almost broke them.
The unshared burden is always, always heavier than the shared one.
We all have ghosts. Unshared burdens, traumas, work stress, family secrets, deep-seated fears that we hide because we think we're protecting our partners. We put up the drywall over the leaky pipe.
But the pipe is still leaking.
But true intimacy requires letting your partner stand in the haunted room with you. You have to let them see the water damage.
You cannot unilaterally decide what your partner can or cannot handle. John proved he could stand in a room with an invisible violent spirit and hold his ground. He could handle the ghosts. but he couldn't survive Nick shutting him out.
Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a lingering, provocative thought built on this incredible source material, and I want to debate this for a second. Think about Nick's newly discovered half-brother, the 8-year-old in Atlanta.
Oh, that's a tough situation.
The story leaves us with the implication that Nick might try to contact him. Let me ask you this. How does a psychic who communes with the dead explain the legacy of a deeply flawed, abandoning father to a grieving 8-year-old?
It is a profound moral and emotional dilemma. Do you shatter a child's idealized image of a father who just died in a tragic plane crash by revealing he was a deadbeat who abandoned his first family?
That feels so cruel to a kid.
Or do you lie by omission, allowing the child to grieve a fantasy?
See, my instinct is protection. You don't dunk that kind of generational trauma on an 8-year-old whose dad just burned up in a plane crash. You let him mourn the dad he knew, even if that dad was a totally different, maybe better person to him than he was to Nick.
But if we look at the central thesis of the entire deep dive, what did we just learn about protection through silence?
That it rots the foundation.
Exactly. If Nick enters this boy's life and acts as a surrogate older brother or guardian figure, but builds that relationship on the secret of their father's true nature, he is just putting up drywall over a leaky pipe all over again. The kid will eventually sense the discrepancy.
That's a fair point. But does knowing the truth about the dead actually make it easier for the living to move on? Or does it simply bind you closer to the ghosts?
It's a risk either way.
If Nick tells the kid the truth, he risks transferring his own bitterness, his own haunting, onto a child who is already carrying the immense trauma of a plane crash.
I would argue that truth, delivered with age-appropriate empathy, is the only way to prevent ghosts from forming in the first place. Ghosts in this narrative are born of unresolved issues, unspoken anger, and hidden secrets.
Right, like Selena's sister.
The sister of Selena couldn't cross over because she held a secret. Grant couldn't cross over because of his unexpressed rage. By keeping the father's past a secret, Nick would essentially be haunting the boy himself.
Wow. That is a heavy, incredible way to look at it. Truth as an exorcism. Something for all of you to mull over as you go about your day. Think about your own unshared burdens. Think about who your anchor is when your own world gets overwhelmingly loud or freezing cold.
Who holds your hand in the dark?
Keep communicating, keep sharing the burden, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.